Hi, guys. Welcome back to another podcast from Anglers Anonymous. On this episode, we are joined by George Bucci, which I like to consider him a master at his craft, and that is surfcasting. South New Jersey all the way up to North New Jersey. We touch on plug building, we touch on the club, money raised, where that goes, who it helps, and trips that he has planned in the future. So, guys, I hope you guys enjoy this podcast as much as I enjoyed interviewing George Bucci. Here we go, guys.
So this is George Bucci, and this is the second time I've got the pleasure of interviewing you, George. And please tell the listeners, for the new listeners that are on here, tell them a little bit about yourself. Tell them how you got started into fishing, and tell them how you are where you are now.
Okay, thanks, Aaron. I think like every young angler, you start early. You start, local lakes and ponds. But being close to salt water, you make that transition. Kind of, I don't want to insult any freshwater fishermen, but like to grown up fish, right? And because there's always that opportunity for something that's just much bigger than you're ever going to get in a freshwater
Sure.
lake. So I started off. My dad used to take me flounder fishing in a rowboat. He used to row us in the bay. He'd row me into the bay, and you can imagine that with a tide. He would
For
drift.
sure.
He would row against the tide back up, into the waterway we were working, and then drift again. And we would do that over and over again.
Wow.
So that was like my first taste of saltwater fishing. And as you get a little older, I was into sports, so I kind of you wouldn't fish as much now and then, going out with buddies on their boats. But it wasn't until I was about 18 and just getting out of high school that I started to really attack the saltwater scene. I lived in Ocean City, and I started sneaking out at night onto some docks, like condo docks, lights. And
Oh yeah.
this was when there was the moratorium. But Jersey still had, I believe it was 36-inch limit. And I'd go out on these docks and I would look down in the lights and I would see these stripers, and I thought they were giant. Here
Right.
they're like 32-inch fish. And with my freshwater gear, I would catch, or wouldn't even catch them. I would hook a couple of them, and they would run under the dock and break me off because I always had like, you know, 6-pound mono
Right.
because it was
Right.
my freshwater. And so you quickly make the transition to heavier gear. You get heavier gear, and I think it was when braid first came out, and it was all white. It was always white braid, and I
Yeah.
got braided line, and got a couple real nice bass. And my buddy lived down the street, and I would run them down the street, show them to him, and then he'd be like, "It's still too small," and I'd run back and throw it back in the bag. And,
Right.
from there, it was. Yeah, then we started learning. You start to see how these bass act on shadow lines of docks, and
Yeah.
if you could just sit there and observe them, and you take that, we would take that and maybe apply it to another location, like a bridge that was nearby, and then other bridges nearby, and you start to figure out the patterns, these nighttime patterns, which basically a shadow line is just structure for a bass. They sit in the dark, they
Sure.
see the bait washing through the light, and so they use it to their advantage. And if you ever stand on top of a bridge in say the fall when the peanut bunker are getting washed out like now, and if your eyesight's good enough, because mine used to be, you can actually sit there, look down, and if you get rid of that light that's shining on your eyes and just look on the shadow, you'll see them in the dark. They just patrol back and forth. They
Sure.
just
Yeah.
patrol, and it's pretty interesting. So that was kind of how I started. And then and I did that for years, a lot of on foot. Then got my first skiff. Well, before that I had a boat, but I wouldn't even call it a boat. It was dangerous to be out there in it. But
Yeah.
I still did very well, and it just hitting local bridges. And then I got a skiff, and I felt more comfortable in that, and I was able to take that and go to the Delaware Bay and learn the Delaware Bay, take it to the Raritan Bay and learn the Raritan Bay, and
Right.
points in between it. And I'd even run that little 17-foot skiff out to like 17, 18 miles. And even in January, I would go in January by myself and troll bass on the beachfront of Ocean City. And the Coast Guard pulled up to me one day and they were like, "What are you doing?" And I was like,
Yeah.
I'm trolling." And they're like, "All right, but be careful. You're by yourself and it's
Right.
January."
Right. Right. And George, I tell people stories about it. I had a 10-foot V bottom aluminum, right? That I thought I was untouchable in. This thing had two foam seats and it had a little 15 horse on the back. So imagine a little rocket, right? And
Yeah.
same deal. I'm off the front of friggin' Atlantic City, and the Coast Guard comes up on me, and he sees the screen, right? I had this like 16-inch friggin', Navionics screen on there. And he's like, all I could see was a TV screen lit up. And he goes, I couldn't even see the boat. He goes, what are you doing out here? You friggin' crazy? So I think it's a Jersey thing. I tell
Oh yeah,
people here, and they're like, what are you,
yeah.
crazy,
When you're young, man, you're willing to push the limits and see what
Oh,
you're
yeah.
capable of. And I was lucky, I never gotten never had problems, never gotten any trouble. I knew my limitations to a point. I did have to pull the plugs a couple times because the waves were coming over the bow,
Oh,
but
yeah.
the skiff is unsinkable. So the guy with me, he was pale white. All the color ran out. I said, listen, put your life jacket on. And if anything happens, stay with the boat. It won't sink. And he was
Right.
like, well, he said, that's assuring. I said,
Yeah, it's settling,
yeah.
No, that's
After that,
awesome, George.
and then I got a 20. I was really starting to get into the surf fishing at the same time that I got rid of the skiff and I got a 21-foot center console because I wanted to be able to go even further.
Right.
But at the time, the surf fishing was just really taking over for me, and I was expanding, my horizons with that and going further to further destinations and really enjoying it. And I really enjoyed it for a long period of time. But as you get older, that gets more difficult. And I see myself kind of regressing back into a boat now, even though I still love to hit the surf. There's just something about pulling any kind of fish out of the surf that's just feels better to me. It just does
For
feel
sure.
better.
I can agree with that. It's almost like a hunter gatherer kind of feeling. It's almost like you're down to the bare bones minimum of what you can catch a fish with. I mean, of course, some guys can go out with a pure cart loaded just like a boat, but I see almost the setup that you have: a plug bag, a rod, and you go, man. And I feel like it brings you back personally. Anyway, it brings me back to the time of throwing a bow over your sling, and going out and bow hunting, to where you're just down to the bare minimum, connecting with nature again.
Yeah. The first time I went to Montauk, I had no idea what I was getting into. Talked a buddy of mine into going up. I said, let's go up. And it was like 10 o'clock at night. I said, let's go. We'll just sleep in your truck. And he said, okay. We threw a bunch of crap into his truck and we drove up there and we got there at like 3 a.m. and we pulled into the lighthouse parking lot and said, let's get a little bit of sleep before it gets light. And he's like, yeah, I agree. We closed our eyes and all you could hear was in the parking lot, the corkers from all the guys
Right.
walking. I go, I said, I got a feeling we probably shouldn't be sleeping right now because I hear everyone. So I went to get my stuff on and I had my stocking foot waders and I had forgotten my boots. I forgot my
Oh,
wading. So I put on a pair of old work boots that I had, strapped corkers on it and duct taped corkers onto a pair of old work boots. And I was like, this is
okay.
going to work. And we were walking down the path towards Turtle Cove, and and I was like, "This is great. There's guys everywhere." And I said to a couple guys, "I go, hey, how you doing? How you making out? How you doing? Pretty good." And they didn't even blink. They didn't look at me. Never answered me.
Mer.
I go, "This is surf fishing." Yeah.
Yeah, man. I got a very, very similar story. My first time up to Montauk, I didn't know about corkers, and three of my buddies joined me up there, man. And we the same deal, 6 hour friggin' drive. You're dreading it. You finally get in the parking lot. I wanted to sleep. Couple younger guys, 18, 19-year-old that I had with me. He's like, we're here. We're in the friggin' Mecca. I don't care what tide it is. I'm going. So he walks out, and we're on the cliff. He walks out of the car, sees the cliff, and was like, how am I getting to the water, right?
Yeah.
So he scurries down the hill, man. And George, I made it in the water maybe about a foot, and it looks like sandy beach to water, on high tide. I get in 1 friggin' foot, dude, and my ankle twists, and I'm under a rock. I'm soaking wet. But needless to say, you can't scream for help because nobody's listening for you, dude. Everybody was in their zone, man, and not paying attention to you at all.
No, it's not the easiest place to fish, and you should have
Mm-mm.
some kind of yeah, and kind of gradually get yourself into that. And I learned my lesson. I got hurt there one year, pretty bad, and had to be like carried back up to my
Oh
buddy.
man.
And we were sleeping in the truck, so I had, I'm not a drinker, but he is. So we were sleeping in the back of his pickup truck, and for 3 days he was just drinking whiskey and fishing, and I
Oh,
was cooking, on the grill because I couldn't move. I had wrecked my knee. I got hit with
oh,
a wave from behind when I was on a rock, and I came down on another rock. I really wasn't.
goodness.
It was dark. I wasn't paying attention. I was there for 15 minutes when that had happened, and I caught a fish and then got hit with that wave, and my
Oh.
weekend was over. Yeah.
Oh, that's rough, man. George, I'll tell you, Montauk will chew you up and spit you out, dude. It really will.
First part was being in the back of the truck with him, drinking, smelling like whiskey for 3 days.
Right.
So now on, it's going to be a hotel room from now on.
I haven't spent the money to get a hotel room, but I tell you this, I went up the last time I was up there, I took my lady up. We had an F-150 and it had the extended cab on it. So we were sleeping a little more comfortable, but we brought the Wave Runner up. So I gave up on surf fishing and the rocks altogether because I knew she wanted to partake in it. And, I didn't have enough gear for the both of us to kind of do it properly. So I find a spot to stick this Wave Runner in, and I didn't know the harbor there doesn't allow wave runners in it at all, right? Like you have to launch off the beach or somewhere private. Yeah. So I'm going through the harbor at first light and I'm hugging the docks, man, because I'm hearing people tell me like, you're not allowed in here with that. So my mind is running like, why the hell, back home in Jersey, like we can run these things all through every friggin' inlet, right?
Yeah.
So I sneak out the harbor and I go around the friggin' lighthouse. I'm on a Wave Runner, my guy, right? I got a cooler and it's got a homemade. Do you know the rack that you put on your extension ladder to keep it off your house?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I flipped that upside down and I stuck a cooler in it and zip tied PVCs to the arms that keep it off the house, right? That was my friggin' rod holder, dude. So I'm trolling off the tip of the lighthouse on a Wave Runner with my lady that's never been on the Wave Runner in the
Oh
ocean
my
before.
God.
Yeah. So mind you, though, it turned out amazing. Though that was one of the best trips. We had porgies. I mean, they were so big. They were just so thick off of diamond jigs. I mean, we're
Yeah.
jigging for bass and we're catching porgies. But yeah, that was one of the most memorable trips to Montauk. Anyway.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Did you get in trouble when you went back in?
We did. We got we didn't get caught going through the harbor, but as we were I was so lucky too, because he's like, if I would have caught you on that ski with fish in the cooler, I would have increased the fine double fold. So we got the ski on the trailer back in the parking lot, and I'm loading the cooler into the truck as the officer pulls up, and he gave us, I think, a $200 fine or something for putting a Wave Runner in. And yeah,
Lesson
I'll eat
learned.
it. Lesson learned.
Yeah.
But it was well spent.
Yeah.
Talking about Montauk, George. I mean, did you ever cut any plugs or make any plugs for Montauk in specifics? Like,
No, I haven't been back to Montauk in probably. I haven't been there in about 6 or 7 years now. I'm thinking of going this year. Just because I don't know, just something about the place. It's
yeah,
like out there. You could feel it. You can feel it like right through you. It's just
right.
even just being there. The fish is secondary to just the feeling I get when I go there. And it's been a while since I've been there, so there's some discussion with a couple of guys that I know about maybe going up for a long weekend.
Yeah.
But
Hey.
yeah, I
I mean,
mean,
even in mid October, George, when I know the bass are in South Jersey,
yeah,
I would still love to just be there because, like you said, that feeling you can't describe it, man. Like you pull into that town and it like overwhelms you. Of you're in this town that everybody has the same thing in mind. It's almost like you stop at the coffee shop. The lady serving you coffee knows the striper blitz is going off out front.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
an
I mean,
amazing feeling.
that first time that I'd gone there, and I told you, we were sleeping in the parking lot, and we should have been
Hmm.
fishing. That morning, when I walked up onto the bluff with my buddy, and we looked down at the water, and the sun was just coming up. There was a massive blitz going on, and it was right up to the rocks.
Yeah.
So come on, let's go! And he ran down and basically pitched a bucktail. He didn't even cast it. He pitched it and, flipped the bass up into the rocks. And I was still standing up above him. And he said, "What are you doing? Come on down." I said, "No." I said, "I'm just going to stand here for a few more minutes and watch this. It's amazing
Right.
here."
Yeah. And George,
That's
you're lucky. I
that's
mean,
that's
I know you know how lucky you are, but not many people get to see it like that anymore, man. Like
yeah,
when I went out with my lady and took her on the Wave Runner, I had her drive. So we switched mid tro, right? And she's driving this thing as I'm facing backwards trying to work these rods. And she's like, "Babe, there's sharks porpoising out of the water and they're everywhere." And I'm like, "Do they have stripes?" And she's like, "Yeah." She goes, "There's a different pattern on the side of them." Love their bass. And
yeah,
dude, George, they were
uh,
everywhere,
yeah,
dude. So it was like getting to experience that and telling her how rare that is. It used to be a common thing there, but I mean, it's so rare now, man. It's a lucky thing to be able to see that for sure.
Yeah, and I know some like a few guys that are new to fishing and new to trying to do the surf thing, and they ask me about going to Montauk, and I really warn them that it's kind of a little more extreme than you're probably hearing about. And if you want to do it properly, you could always go to the sand beaches, Hither Hills,
Yep.
that whole area. And I've gone and camped at Hither Hills and never had to leave there.
Yeah.
Never had to leave the beach because it was so good on the beach. I was like, why am I going to walk on the rocks? It's great right here. So, but if you're going to go jumping around on the rocks at Montauk, you should have some level of experience with doing it. Like,
Yes.
I grew up on all the jetties in South Jersey. I still at 55 years old, I fly around on the jetties probably quicker than I should move,
Right.
but I still do. But yeah, you should have some kind of experience.
I agree, and I mean, if there's any listeners thinking of going to Montauk, I so highly agree with George. I mean, we're telling you our horror stories of when we first went, and I was watching YouTube videos for a month straight of, I didn't have anybody in South Jersey that was older than me that's been to Montauk. They had no idea what the hell Montauk was, right? So we're researching the shit out of it as much as we possibly can, and all we're getting is these blitz videos and how amazing it is, and
Yeah.
So guys, I came down on the rocks and almost broke my ankle. George had a serious accident that, left him in the truck for, days. So
I watched my buddy under the lighthouse that same when I got hurt.
mm-hmm.
I limped with him just to keep an eye on because it was at night and there was a big swell, and he had too much whiskey in him, and he went down on the rocks at the lighthouse. I said, "It's too big, don't do it." And I watched a wave hit him and lift him off the rock he was on and place him on another rock 20 feet away.
Goodness, dude.
And he climbed up, soaking wet. He climbed up and he said, "Time to go to bed." And I said, "Yes, thank you."
Yeah, enough's enough, right?
Yeah.
George, so that first trip that I made with these young guys, man, you literally sparked this. So we're sitting on the rocks. It was one of them first nights that we're down there, and it's pitch dark. I think one of us had a friggin' headlamp. Again, guys, so unprepared, right? So we're sitting down on the flat rocks where the pillbox is underneath the lighthouse, and I'm at awe that there's this square box of concrete just sitting there in front of us, right? I see these two red lights start bobbing right in front of us in the water, and I'm like, the yellow to my buddy Josh. I'm like, Josh, you see these red lights? No, you're tripping. You need to go to sleep. You're seeing shit. Josh, no, there's red lights. Every time the wave crests, I see these little red lights. George, there's two guys skishing. So the first time I've ever even seen it or heard of it, right? Yeah. They're in full body wetsuits with red lights on, and they're dragging eels floating, dude, right? These guys, like ballerinas, they must ride the wake so perfectly to where when the wave crashes the rock at the pillbox, both of them are standing on the pillbox.
Wow.
From the water to the pillbox. I'm like, oh my God. Like, wow. I'm seeing shit. I couldn't believe this. But skishing, man, I don't know if you've ever tried it, but
no, that's not for me. I've had to swim in a couple times with my wetsuit, and that's as far as I want to do it. I don't want to actually fish while I'm floating.
Yeah, I can't see that either, man. I mean, these guys had some huevos on them, George. They're dragging live eels, trying for bass.
No.
Yeah, no. I think of myself as an extremist, but not when it comes to dragging live bait.
No, I'm drawing lines. Yeah, and that's where
that's where we're drawing it. So George, I mean, I follow you pretty religiously on social medias platforms, and I see that you put together some builds here and there, man. Some lure builds. You want to tell the listeners about some lures you build?
Fishing. South Jersey isn't known for fishing metal lips, but the further north you go, you get up into North Jersey and further north, the metal lip lure is pretty prominent, and there's different styles. They run deeper. There's pikeys and eelies and donnies and dannies.
Yeah.
But I was good friends with a builder by the name of Bill Couch, CCW, Cedar Works, and so I used to fish some of his stuff. He'd give me some stuff, and we were good friends. Fished with him all the time, and then I decided I was going to start to try it, just make a couple for myself. And it's amazing how quickly that just like expand. You go, I'm just going to get a lathe, and then I'll do everything else by hand. And next thing you know, I have a full shop now in my basement. I haven't made anything since May, and that's only because I've been I've been fishing my ass off this whole summer, more than I expected to, and more than I probably have in the last few years for summertime.
Sure.
You know, except aside from trips up north.
Yeah.
But like I kind of got back into the fluking thing this year. But back to the plugs, it's one of the more rewarding things I've ever done. It's kind of fired something back up in me to make something, and it's very time consuming. And the money that you pay for these things is nowhere near what you should be paying for the amount of time and effort and material that guys put into it. And I know that for a fact. And I basically I give them away or sell them very cheap just to have, just material, like sell them to get material money back.
Yeah,
To make some profit, but I'm buying, hundreds and hundreds of dollars of material, but I just love giving them away and then getting a picture like the next day or 2 days later of one of these plugs in a fish's mouth. And it's awesome. And then catching one on your own stuff. Like I started with pencils. I think pencils are probably the easiest thing to make. So I started with pencils for the canal the one year, and we were all my buddies were catching fish on them. And a guy next to me, he said, "What kind of pencil's that?" I said, "I made it." He said, "Oh, can I have one?" And I gave it to him, and he was catching the crap out of fish on it.
Right.
At the canal, you could throw a stick, to be honest with you. You could throw anything. And
Sure.
then I kind of I started to morph that into putting lips on things and trying different things. And the stuff that I thought was good when I started, I was like, "Wow, this looks great." I look at it now and I go, "That is absolutely."
I think that happens a lot though, George. It really does, man. My first lipped plug, right? I thought I didn't do any testing. Again, new at it. You're always buying stuff. My first lip plug, I put this thing together, and I'm telling my buddy that we're going out striper fishing, all about this new friggin' hobby I'm taking up, and I can make him anything he wants. And we get out on his boat, and I drop this thing in. It floats belly up, and it won't. So I get it. Trust me, I get it.
It's really, and I luckily, Bill's passed away, but I had Bill at the time to walk me through things, and I would call him 2 or 3 times a day from down in my basement. "Hey, I'm trying to weight this. I'm trying to do this. I'm trying," and he would walk me through things. And some things he would laugh at me about, and he would get. I have told this story before. I was doing the finish on my plugs, and I did my epoxy, and he used to tell me, when you get air bubbles in it, you can heat it up, or you can just try to breathe on it. Sometimes that'll get the bubbles out. So I called him one day. I said, "Listen," I said, "how do I get epoxy off my lips?" He goes, "I'll get a little bit of alcohol and rub the metal lip." And I go, "No, not the metal lips." I said, "My lips." Got them too close. I was blowing on it. He laughed for 20 minutes. He laughed at me for 20 minutes.
That's good, dude. That's really good. But to have a mentor, look at the positive end of that. To have a mentor to walk you through it, George. I was in a shed on the side of my grandmother's house with nobody to call. Like I wish I would have even had you, because it was like trial and error throughout it all. I was gassing these plugs up so high, and then get out on the boat and they come belly up. It's like, what? I thought I did everything right. I threw wires through. I have good friggin', I have good swivels on it. I mean, it's got a good cap. But yeah, man, having a mentor is awesome, dude. That was really nice.
By far, what I consider good at it, he was a master of it.
Yeah.
But and I still make things where you want to experiment, you want to try something different. You have an idea in your head, and you may not weight it right. And then I go to my local lake and I go, "This is the one," and then I swim it and I hate it. And I have a pile of those. I have a large box of those plugs that I can't do anything with them. I can't give them away, and I can't use them, so they just kind of sit. I started fooling around with bottle swimmers. And the first one I made, I was like, and I took my time. It took me so much time to build it. And then I went and tried to swim it, and it didn't swim at all. It was a stick, and I was crushed. And I was like, I'm not going to do them again. And then I made 3 more. I made 3 more different styles, different weights. They're all different looking.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been sitting in my basement for about a year now, untested.
Oh, man.
I'm afraid to test them.
Right. And I trust me, I know how that feels, George.
Yeah.
But, I listen, if there's one thing I can tell you, don't feel bad, because I've been out of the plug building scene for probably 6 years now. I left my lathe in New Jersey and didn't purchase one and set one up here in Florida yet, dude. And it's killing me inside, man, because there's so many times where I'll find a nice piece of wood, because Florida's got all sorts of different species of, hardwoods and softs here. I find a nice piece of wood, man, and I'm just like, I'm ready to sharpen a knife and get to it in the shed
Yeah,
again,
yeah,
like because damn, dude, I'm like the pattern in the wood alone, I don't even need to paint this thing. This thing's got stripes on it, and but yeah, don't feel bad, buddy. Trust me,
yeah.
I'm lacking. I got the itch, but I've been lacking for a while.
Yeah, we ran our tournament. We ran in Bill's name, and that was a huge success. We raised about $6,000 for the Greater Atlantic Cancer Fund, who
Yeah,
they take care of people that can't pay their bills who may have cancer or other terminal diseases. So
yeah, sure.
we're keeping Bill's name alive in that way, and and I still, when I go fishing, I still talk to him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's good. And I got a buddy like that, George, that just passed away. I want to say last year. Last year, I don't want to get the date messed up, so I'm not even gonna tell you the date. So
Yeah.
last year, really, really close friend of mine, and I caught a snook the day that he passed, and I hold the snook up, and I'm like, this one's for you, Bear. This one's for you because I was feeling like crap, dude, that whole friggin'
Yeah.
day, and
Yeah.
that to have a tournament in his name, that's awesome. Is this an annual tournament
We're,
every year that you guys continue on?
that is the goal. Yes. Yeah.
Awesome, man.
Yeah.
And this year was the first of the tournament, or
Yes. Yeah. We had 130 people sign up. It was a catch and release striped bass tournament, and I think the winner was 49.5 inches. It was big fish.
True. Yeah,
And second place was like 48. I mean, they were all big fish. We had
quality
some
fish.
we
Yeah,
had, we had some heavy hitter guys fishing the tournament. And it was New Jersey only. The first wave, it was a week long. The first wave of fish came into the tournament from like Raritan.
yeah,
And we had looked at moon faces very carefully and knew how this was going to play out, that there was going to be some Raritan fish. Then the South Jersey was going to kick in. And that's exactly how it played out. The Raritan fish came in, and then quickly the South Jersey fish, which are going to be the larger migratory fish coming out of Delaware Bay, Chesapeake Bay, they
yeah.
pushed in just in time for our tournament, and some big fish were caught.
Wow,
And yeah, it played out
that was
perfectly. So
strategic.
it
That was
kept
super
everybody on
strategic,
edge.
dude.
Everybody had to work hard, and it kept everybody on edge. It was great.
No, that's awesome, man. I'm hoping to get back in the spring of this year coming, man, and start fishing some of these tournaments with you guys, man.
Yeah, you got to.
George, so is there a tournament that I saw on Facebook that's coming up for you guys?
Well, there's the Advanced Fishing USA tournament.
That's the one.
Yeah, which is Century Rods. That's who I use their rods. I use Century rods for advanced fishing.
Yeah.
And they have it's going to be this year. It's going to be all catch and release. It's going to be weak fish, bluefish, and striped bass. And the first place in each one of those divisions is a custom Century rod. Yeah, I am not allowed to fish that. And a couple other guys that I fish with aren't allowed to fish that because we're on basically on Century Pro staff. But I keep asking if I can I enter? Come on, can I enter? Because the giveaways alone are phenomenal. And then the rods, you're talking about a rod for a weak fish. And if you're going to be fishing anyway, you might as well enter for $50. You can enter that and get a shot at a custom rod.
Yeah. I mean, come on.
Yeah. I mean, even though you can never have enough rods, I'd love to have another rod.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'd love to have my first Century, George, to be honest with you, dude, because I've been putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. And every single time I go to look for a new setup, my mind goes right back to the Century. And I'm just like, I either do that or I get a reel and rod, my own combo put together. But I'm like, or I spend that on a rod, and I want to do it, dude. It's nothing against it, Century at all, because if I freaking had it, I'd have them, and I'd be stocked full of them, dude. But I haven't done it yet, dude. I need my first, George.
That demon. I know you like your light tackle, like I like my light tackle, and that demon is second to none. It really? There's nothing. Light tackle wise, there's nothing that can match that. It is just such a fun rod, and sneaky powerful.
I'm gonna have to write that down on my Christmas list and pray that someone's listening. But
for the tournament, if anybody listening wants to get in on it, it's all New Jersey waters this year. There was boundaries before, but it'll be all New Jersey waters, and it'll be. You can look up the dates at Advanced Fishing USA on Facebook or Instagram. I think they posted all the dates and the rules for that on there.
Nice. And George, tell the listeners a little bit about the club, man. You have anything going on in the club, or anything that we're going to be looking forward to with the club?
Yes, Cape Atlantic Striper Club. Well, we wrapped up the tournament and kind of slowed everything down a little bit. We had an influx of new members, so we're kind
That's
of
amazing.
yeah, it was really good for us. We did a trip to Cape Cod Canal, which did not go well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, well, when you book a trip like that, you sit down way in advance because you have to book everything way in advance. So what I
Sure.
do is I sit down and I look at the moon phases, and then I look at the tides, and you try to see which tides are going to be the hardest run and the highest, lowest,
Yep.
those big tides. And there was none that really stuck out. Even last year, there was none that stuck out. But we had fished last year, but there's none that stick out. So you just kind of go, all right, let's go on this, this new moon. And really, up until this last couple of weeks, I think the canal's been pretty dead. When we were there, it was dead.
Yeah.
And you can be there on the new moon, you could be there on the big tides, but there's not going to be any fish if there's no bait.
Right.
We had no squid, we had no mackerel. There really wasn't anything. There was some whiting coming through with some small fish, but for me, and we had a lot of guys that fished hard. But for me personally, it was extremely difficult because I wasn't feeling well on the day that we left,
Yeah.
and by the time I got there, I had full blown COVID.
Oh,
So
man.
I was stuck in the cabin with 103 fever. Luckily, my two cabin mates had just recently gotten over it.
Yeah.
So they weren't going to get it again, and neither of them did get it. So I kind of was stuck. Even though I tried to fish, it was very difficult to fish with the sun hurt my skin.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
but I did manage to get a couple fish. I started to feel better the last couple of days of the trip, but it was a difficult, difficult.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
No, it kicks your ass. I was down. I was down for 5 days this last time that I got COVID, man, and it was like body aches and
Yeah.
a high temp and not wanting to eat, and I can only
No.
imagine being in a place like that and wanting to fish but can't. It's
Yeah.
just God's sakes, George. I'm sorry, man.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, luckily enough, I was in a position where the guys, anything I needed, they got me, and
Yeah.
I was in a comfortable spot. I had my own room with a nice bed and a TV, and we had air conditioning, so I was able
Hey.
to stay comfortable and cool and hydrated, and just got through it. And every time you start to feel good, let's say it's weird, you feel good, and you're like, all right, I'm going to push it, and then I'd ride like 3 miles away from the cabin and on my bike, and I'd be like,
Yeah.
boy, that was about as dumb a thing as I've ever done.
Yeah, I know. Well, at least this time you weren't in the back of a truck with a dude smelling like whiskey. I mean, imagine having COVID in that situation, dude. It'd been rough,
Yeah.
But goodness, George, man. Listen, this has been really good talking to you, buddy. And I can't wait for next year, dude, to be able to hopefully get on that Cape Cod trip with you, man. Because Cape Cod is, if the listeners are listening about Montauk, Cape Cod's just that next Mecca, man. That's like that next step up on the bucket list, if not your first, bucket list check off that you got to make. I mean, if you're a surf fisherman or even a boat fisherman and you want to experience one of like God's gifts to striped bass, it's got to be them two places for me for sure. And there's many more, but just them two. Yeah,
And the thing about Cape Cod is it's an easy place to fish, and if you're there with a group of guys, it's a great place to just build camaraderie and spend some time with friends and still be able to fish. You don't have to swim to a rock like Montauk and yell to each other through the wind and the waves. It's a place where I could be side by side with a friend catching fish and enjoying conversation, and that's what I love about it. I love that aspect of it.
No, for sure, and especially being able to rent out a spot, man. I mean, it makes the trip way better. I slept in the back of a car. I mean, I think we went up in a Honda Civic the first time we went up, dude. 4 guys, so it was not comfortable accommodations, that's for sure. But George, man, you are welcome on here any friggin' time, buddy. So whenever you want to come back on and talk fishing, man, the door's wide open.
Yeah, anytime you want me to. I'd
Thank
love
you,
to,
George.
All right.
Appreciate you, buddy.